So we're just a couple of hours away from the reciprocal tariffs taking effect. South Korea and the United States reached a trade deal yesterday, allowing Washington to impose a 15% tariff on Korean imports. For more on this, we're joined by Professor Greg Buchak, Professor of Finance at Stanford Graduate School of Business, Stanford University. Professor Buchak, thanks for joining us this morning.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So high tariffs are set to take effect just after midnight today. So what's your overall assessment of the Trump administration's tariff policy? Do you think pressuring countries has been effective in what he wanted to achieve, such as countering China?
Yeah, so I think Trump's tariff strategy has been a fairly blunt force, and as you can see from a lot of the last-minute implementations, a bit chaotically implemented, and I think not actually super well tailored to U.S. strategic interests. So, broadly, there's really three strategic reasons that one might want to impose tariffs. One is kind of obvious. It's raising revenues, and it's true that revenues from tariffs have increased, but the number is actually fairly small relative to the U.S. federal budget. And economists tend to think of tariffs as being sort of a very inefficient way to raise revenue because they distort a lot of economic behavior. Another reason you might do it is to kind of reshore U.S. manufacturing. And the idea is if we make goods imported from foreign countries more expensive for U.S. consumers, they'll have incentives to buy locally, and local producers will be able to sort of compete within the U.S. Now, it's not super obvious why the U.S. wants more like factory workers and less computer programmers, but that's sort of what Trump is aiming for. But the irony in a lot of this of Trump's implementation here is there are actually very high tariffs on raw materials like steel and aluminum, and these are the things that U.S. factories would need to actually produce. So these sort of high tariffs on raw materials kind of run directly counter to this goal of reshoring U.S. manufacturing. And then the final thing that you mentioned, I think, is probably the best justification for this, which is sort of geopolitically countering China. But unfortunately, I also think that the tariff strategy there is a little bit incoherent. If you were trying to target China, what you would do is sort of build a free trade network of U.S. allies like Korea, Japan, Vietnam, and so on, and then try to crack down on transshipment from China. And then together as a sort of free trade coalition, you would then impose tariffs on China as a bloc. By the way, that's actually sort of close to what we got from the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which was something that was negotiated during the Obama administration that Trump actually threw out during his first term. And instead, Trump is going about it in this sort of haphazard way, tariffing potential allies. The whole thing, to me, seems a little bit incoherent for these goals.
I see. And as for South Korea, Seoul and Washington agreed to lower the tariff rate to 15%, with Seoul promising to invest $350 billion in the United States. The Korean government says the deal puts South Korea on an equal or even better footing than other countries, and that it has helped remove trade uncertainties. What are your thoughts on the agreement compared to the deals Washington has reached with other nations?
I think that's right. So South Korea is sort of at this 15% level, which is the kind of global tariff floor. And as you were hearing earlier in the news reports, there are some countries that have sort of more higher putative tariff rates. So, 15% is sort of good relative to other countries. It's unfortunately higher than what many people would think is ideal, which is actually 0%. But as you mentioned, it's very good to sort of have this ironed out and removing some uncertainty around Korean exports. On paper, this looks very similar to the kinds of deals that the U.S. has with the EU. I think it's particularly important for Korea, which relies so much on exporting things like batteries and automobiles to the U.S., to just have this kind of locked up. As you mentioned, another big part of this that Trump sort of sees as a big win, and hopefully it's mutually beneficial to both countries, is this $350 billion of investment that's spread across things like shipbuilding, semiconductors, energy, biotech, liquid natural gas purchases. It's a really big commitment, and hopefully it ends up being mutually beneficial for the United States and Korea.
I see. All right, Professor Buchak, I'm afraid that's all the time we have for today. Thank you so much for your insight. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.